Afternoon, Tanisha.
Hello, ma'am. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you today?
I'm okay.
Good.
Hey, hello. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Hello, how
Yes.
are you?
Sorry, I was a little late. I was getting my audio set up. My audio always takes like fully 12 hours to get set up for every meeting.
Okay. Not a problem at all. We can go ahead and I think get started. Let me just. How's your day going so far?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right, cool. I would like to welcome everybody to our latest edition of Bring a Hacker to Work Day. I'm very excited. We were actually supposed to speak with Alex maybe 2 weeks ago, and then life happened, so we rescheduled. So I'm happy we were able to get it rescheduled for today. So, Alex, tell us what is it that you do? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everyone. So yeah, first of all, I'm really happy Tanisha asked me to be here and talk with you guys. So, um, I guess my official like on the books title is technical solutions engineer. I find that I'm more in a customer success role, generally post sales. And I work for a company called For All Secure. And our main thing that we do is fuzz testing and penetration testing as part of DevSecOps, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. Um, and yeah, so it's kind of cool. We basically try to break things, and then once we've figured out a way to break things, we usually responsibly disclose it. And then our product basically helps customers break things themselves, so they don't have to wait for somebody to break stuff. I think the whole principle, I think, is to hack yourself before somebody else hacks you, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's kind of what I do.
Okay. And so how did you did you go to school to become a technical solutions engineer or?
No, I don't think anyone ever does. Well, I'm sure there's some people who do, but so I actually um I went to my undergrad in Boston University, and I originally was studying music, and I studied music for about two. I I played it very risky. You're supposed to really decide on a major by your end of your sophomore year, and it wasn't until the beginning of my junior year that I picked computer science. So fully 2 years into my undergrad, where I was like, I need to, you know, overload on classes or something. The music thing didn't work out. There was a lot of reasons why it didn't work out. Um, but I had taken a couple of CS courses in my freshman year, and so I did computer science. I was really into systems at the time, especially operating systems when I did start. So my junior senior year, I was like fully into computer science. I was really into operating systems and trying to figure out how those worked. Um, so I graduated and kind of didn't really know what I was doing. Um, but I ended up finding an interview for just a like very kind of low level support job, like support
Like tech support?
tech support job, and that's kind of what started me on my trajectory was accepting that job offer, which I can talk a little bit more about if you want. But
Absolutely. So a lot of folks say that their first job out the gate is like either tech support or systems admin, that types of vibe. So how did that, how did that go, and how did that play into, I guess your evolution?
it's really interesting. So in my senior year of college, I don't know if you're familiar with the company Epic. They're a
The video game?
medical.
Oh,
No,
oh,
it's there.
not
There's another one. And they
the
do
medical record systems. So
medical record systems. Yeah, that's right.
yes.
So they're really into recent grads. And they fly you out to, I think it's Madison, Wisconsin. So I was in Boston at the time. I thought I was going to stay in Boston. They flew me out for an interview. They fly a lot of people out for interviews. Like that's kind of their thing. And I thought it was going to be kind of what you said, system admin type thing. And I got like all the way through the interview process, and I was talking to the woman who was interviewing me, and I don't know how she figured this out. Maybe she just like divined it somehow. But she said, "I don't think you want to work here." I was
Ooh,
like, I didn't even know it myself. Like, when you're first out of college, you want to work it. You don't care. You have no standards, right? You're like,
pay
I
me.
will pay. Yeah, just I need a job. My mom will be so disappointed in me if I am back in my like childhood bedroom. So, um, I was like ready to drop everything. Madison, Wisconsin for life, baby. That was what I was about to be. And she said, I don't think you're right for this job. And so then I didn't get the job, and it took me about I probably sent out interviews everywhere. Um, and I had a good friend of mine from college who's from San Francisco, and so I started looking at jobs in San Francisco. It's a big tech scene, and somehow happened on this tech support job. Again, it was kind of entry level, and went through a couple interview processes, and at the same time there was a similar job that had taken me through the final steps, and it was based in my hometown, which is Louisville, Kentucky. My mom really wanted me to obviously stay in my hometown because then she'd be close to me. San Francisco is a long ways away from Kentucky. And I don't know, I kind of felt it kind of felt like the right move to me. And a lot of my friends, they were getting jobs in their hometowns and stuff like that. And they were doing well, and I hadn't had a job yet. And so it was a bit of a risky move for me to pack up everything and go to San Francisco, especially for, again, like an entry level tech support job. It ended up being like one of the best decisions I made because that opened up so many doors for me. San Francisco is a huge tech hub. And so like just being there, I think was more important than like my resume. It was more important than like some of the I had skills and things, like I had done this. I think just being there and being where so many jobs were opening up was really, really important. So starting that tech job and moving to San Francisco really kind of opened up a lot of opportunity for me.
So it's interesting. I know you say you started off as music and you ended up in computer science. Like, were any of the jobs that you applied for like developer type roles?
Yeah. So my first trip out to San Francisco, I actually had 2 interviews lined up. One was with a company called Synopsys, which I ended up working for about 5 years, and the other company was for Unity. And this was going to be, I was hoping to do like game design with Unity and like eventually like sound design.
Tie it back to the music.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to do. And what I landed, I was there for a day. Both interviews were supposed to be, I like landed like Wednesday night, I had Thursday, and then both interviews were supposed to be Friday. And then Unity like called me on Thursday or something, or like, hey, we can't do the interview, we move forward with another candidate. And I'm like, okay, well, good thing I didn't like fly across the country or anything for that interview.
Just for this, yeah.
Yeah, that, and it's also funny now, this was what, 2015, right? So Zoom interviews are so much more common these days. But I don't know what the whole shift from in-person to Zoom interviews happened, or if it's still happening. But in any case, yeah, that job was more going to be more of a developer type role, and I really just accepted the tech support job because it was San Francisco. I was ready to take a risk. I was ready to move somewhere, ready to get out of Kentucky. Nothing's wrong with Kentucky. I love Kentucky, but there's a lot more opportunity in the SF tech area, and I was just it felt like the right move to me at the time. So yeah, I ended up taking that tech support role.
Okay. And then how long did you stay there?
So I think that was a very critical part of my journey into software security. So Synopsys had just acquired a company called Coverity, which was a static analysis company. And again, I was doing tech support. I barely knew anything about anything. I had a couple of guys who were, old software heads who knew a lot about everything, and they really helped me just kind of get my feet wet, get my bearings and everything. I'm really grateful to the people who helped me just kind of learn super basic stuff. I was at Synopsys in total about, I want to say 5 years, but I was only in this tech support capacity for about a year. As I don't know if this is luck or me just being crazy, but I happen to speak Japanese.
Crazy.
Yeah. I studied abroad in Osaka, Japan in high school when I was 16, 17 years old. And so I speak Japanese fluently. And
is that on your resume?
It is on my resume.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Random. Go ahead.
No, you're all good. And we happen to have a customer success team. It's kind of crazy story. I'll try and put all the parts together. So we had a customer success team in Tokyo, Japan, that was just being started up. There was another individual on my team who had been on my team for way longer than I had. He was a sales engineer, and he was interested in working abroad for a year. And so some people in my company started trying to open up opportunities for this other individual to work abroad for a year, originally in Japan, but then they realized, oh, we need somebody who really speaks the language. So then they just started looking for somebody like it. I don't think if it wasn't for him wanting to work abroad, and if it wasn't for me speaking Japanese, and if it wasn't for this like new like
acquisition,
yeah, then all of those things kind of like fell into place. For whatever reason, they're like, yeah, this kid who's straight out of college, you speak Japanese, go over there. So they sent me over there for 6 months. I worked in Tokyo. It was great. I had a great time. And I spent a lot of my time building up the CS team. It was a very difficult time. A lot of the employees in the Tokyo office were like twice my age. They were like, what are you doing? They like one person actually sat me down in a meeting. He's like, so why are you here? Like, what are you doing here? And I felt really bad. I felt really embarrassed. I was like, I wanted to prove myself. So I worked really hard. We did some interviewing. We did some hiring. I kind of helped translate a lot of documents for the CS team in Japan. when I came back to San Francisco after my 6-month stay, the guy who was the lead of the customer success team was like, well, do you want to just keep doing this? And I said, sure. So that's kind of what put me into this more like technical solutions role, because our CS team there was doing a lot of professional services at the time. So I had to learn super fast to do all this stuff, but it was such a great opportunity for me to go over there because it, again, opened, I think saying yes to a lot of these things opened so many opportunities that I probably would not have had if I had picked the safer, less risky routes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So after you come back, they're like, hey, do you want to stick around? So did you get more involved in like the static analysis tools, and does that like how you got
Yes.
introduced into all of the things?
Yeah, so my role previously was really just tech support. It was trying to solve problems. If I couldn't figure out a problem, I would kick it over to engineering. They would fix it, and then they would kick it back to me. Once I started doing customer success, is when I really got to think a little bit more holistically about security. And because I would basically, we'd have customers that would purchase, static analysis as part of their, it would either be like a top-down mandate, like somebody, says, we have to do security now. So that's a requirement. And now, we need to buy some tools, or we need to like add this into our process. So it wasn't just me like solving one-off problems anymore. It was me like really understanding the motivation behind organizations adding security into their process, and really understanding why people wanted to add security tools. But also like a huge part of it was like realizing that like people kind of hate security tools if it is if it's a blocker, if it's something that prevents them from doing their work, they hate it. And that was another challenge that I had to solve. So it wasn't just solving technical challenges anymore. I had gotten pretty good at solving the technical challenges, but now I was just solving these like
process type.
I would say almost political challenges, right? Because there's the developers team, and then there's the systems team and security team. And a lot of times they're at odds with each other. The security team doesn't always understand enough about the development process to understand that if they ask a developer to do this, it might be really difficult. The development team doesn't know why we're doing security. And the operations team is just saying, hey, don't break my builds. I'm up until like 3 a.m. every day fixing builds. Please don't add more things that will break my builds. So
that is a
really
great synopsis of like life right now.
Yeah,
for everybody.
It's really understanding kind of the political nature between the groups that are going to be interacting with your tools, which I thought was fascinating. So it wasn't just me like, oh, I can fix this technical problem, but like, what's the best solution that would make everyone happy? I can't make everyone 100% happy, but if I can make everyone's lives a little bit easier, like who do I need to approach? Like what group of people, like should it be the developers? Should it be the ops team? Do I need to approach first in order for this to work? And that was really interesting to me, and kind of something that took it beyond just the, hey, why is this command not working? Why is this dependency not there? I had all those skills now at that point, and so it was taking that a step further and like understanding the impetus and the why behind a lot of that stuff that was really helpful.
So at this point, you still don't have any, like, do you have a security title at this point? And do you don't have like any, for example, like certifications, or you've got basically your degree and you've got like, hey, I've been in the right place in the right time, and I took a couple of great chances on myself. Yep. And so, but at this point, you're not like technically in security. And was security your goal at that point? Or you're just like, hey, I just need to keep working?
It really wasn't. But I found that I was super interested in it as a topic, and I didn't even realize why I was interested in it as a topic. I had started to remember back when I was like really young, elementary school, middle school, and we used to play pranks on like the computer lab people, where we would like, we would save, you would make an Internet Explorer icon, but you would change the command to be something like shut down the computer, or like open up a bunch of like cat pictures or something like that. And people would then you would just say that there, or you would, another thing that was fun that we would do is like, we would take a screenshot of the whole desktop with all the icons, and then set that as the background and delete all the icons so that nobody could use them. It's like these silly things. where I would engage in this sort of like adversarial behavior, or like, oh, it's like, I wonder if we can take this website down with like low orbit ion cannon, like that could be funny, haha. And now working in this role where I'm kind of like on the other side of it, I started to realize, I'm like, oh, I actually do have a lot of requisite knowledge for security. If you think about it as kind of trying, like, a lot of the stuff that I was doing as a kid is kind of like a joke, is a very like crude example of what hackers end up trying to do to organizations and to individuals to at best case, disrupt the peace, maybe, make things a little bit more annoying, and the worst case, stealing data and causing, ransomware and things like that. And so I was like, oh yeah, maybe I actually do have a lot of background and actually like this. It also helped at the time that one of our VPs of something happened to hold a CISSP, and he decided that everyone should get one of these. I did not get one. I have a CSSLP, which is a little bit easier to take a quiz and get. And I think I did also certified ethical hacker for a while. I let that lapse because I didn't find it was
useful,
serving me so much. Yeah, it was just kind of like memorizing command line flags. I'm like, that's not interesting. But the CSSLP was pretty interesting. It was helpful, and I started to just kind of like, it was helpful because our whole company was kind of doing it. So like sales engineers, CS, support, they were all kind of working towards these goals, so we could like talk to each other and like share the same language. And since customers were always asking us for things all the time, like they were looking at us like we were the security experts. A lot of times, and this is something I think people have trouble understanding when they're hiring for a security role and they look for the technical things. They're like, hey, you need to know C, C++. Hey, you need to know how Docker works or how Jenkins works. Yes, I agree, totally. But customers don't typically come to security companies for C and C++ expertise.
right?
They've already got, their developers are the C and C++ experts. Their developers are the Docker experts. What they're coming to you for is security expertise. So yes, it's good. It's important to know C and C++, but no one's coming to you for C advice. They're coming to you for security advice. And I found that, taking those exams, adding that CSSLP to my resume, it's helpful. I don't think it helped me get any jobs, but it was just so helpful for me to be able to speak a language that I only really had seen like obscured. And now I kind of like had like direct interaction with it. I was able to have so much more fruitful conversations with customers that maybe they, obviously the sales goal is to get more deals or whatever. I don't really care so much about that. What I care about is like, are the things that we are doing valuable and useful? Do they add value? Are they making things more secure? Are we like making the process easier and more secure in that whole, procedure? So yeah, that's kind of what I ended up doing.
So you said that for all secure, there's basically fuzzing and penetration testing type of
Correct.
like services, right? So, but it sounds like maybe your position might be a mix of like maybe technical things as well as sales, more customer facing as opposed to technology facing. Is that correct, or what does that
I
look
think that's
like?
pretty accurate. Yeah. As my role has evolved over, and I've been doing this for 7.5 years now. As my role has evolved, and I've, when you're in CS, it's almost inevitable that you're going to interact with sales and pre-sales, and you end up having to educate customers on what they're about to buy, like potential customers, about like what, why should you get this and why is it interesting? And in order to do that, you have to prove to yourself that it's interesting, right? Like, if I do the research and I look at this and I'm like, oh, this actually doesn't add any value at all, why would I keep working for that company? So I had to actually understand some of the stuff behind what we were doing. And I found myself doing a lot more, instead of just like the post-sales stuff, I found myself doing a lot more trainings. I found myself doing a lot more presentations. Now I do so many presentations. We just did one for SANS, the DevSecOps survey. We did that 2-3 weeks ago. I was a speaker on that panel. In 2 weeks, I'll be in San Jose at the API World 2022 conference talking about API security. These are things that like, I ever expected to be doing, but like, because I have to know so much more beyond, oh, it's a fuzz testing product or it's a static analysis product. I have to be able to speak to the industry, and I have to be able to speak to the I guess the subject or the the topic at hand. That when I do these trainings, I find myself pulling from other disciplines and pulling from other organizations in order to like speak holistically on the topic of security.
Hmm. And you have to understand how it could potentially fit into whatever I guess the customers are trying to do, right? How it fits into their, because as you said, there's always this thing where you have like the developers, the ops people who are basically always at odds, and security is just trying to stop them from doing whatever it is they're trying to be doing, right?
100%.
So you have to be able to explain that. So what does a day in your life, look like? As you said, as a technical solution, is it architect? Is that right? Or
engineer, architect?
engineer?
Yeah, sure. It's so different. I'm sure everyone says, oh, it varies. It does vary. And I think, first of all, if you're in a job where your day-to-day work doesn't vary, I'm sorry. I think
I think
need
it's a new job.
Right. Well, I think the mark of a good boss and a good organization is to give employees like varied work. It keeps you fresh. It keeps you interested in what you're doing. You're still able to build the core skills at hand, but you do it in a way that's, again, interdisciplinary. So a day in my life, that's a good question. I usually wake up and make an obscene amount of coffee, probably like a liter of coffee in French press. It's a huge amount of coffee. Drink it all. And I usually start looking through any sort of correspondence, whether it's email, Slack, something like that. Usually interesting things will have popped up, whether those will be customers asking interesting questions about like benchmarks they've run, or a certain problem that someone's run into, and I'll usually like to dive into those right away. Easy to respond emails. I'll take care of those. And then if someone asks like a super interesting question, it's like, why is this happening? I kind of really like to do that stuff in the morning. So I will try and work on issues that customers have brought up. And then usually towards the afternoon, I'll have a number of calls. I'll either be pre-sales calls, or there'll be regular weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly check-ins with customers. And usually when I do that, we have an agenda where we're trying to figure out, again, we don't want to sell people tools. I don't think that's the perspective we have. More and more, we're thinking of ourselves as a DevSecOps company than just a fuzzing company, because we don't want to sell people tools. We want to sell people like solutions, and we want to help them, get the things they need. So I find that a lot of times when I'm meeting with customers in those afternoon meetings, we're talking about, all right, well, we've already integrated fuzzing. What's our next step? Or like, what are we going to do afterwards? And a year from now, what do you want your security policy to look like? What do you want your thing to look like? I'll do that in the afternoon. And then as I'm kind of wrapping my day up, I actually do a little bit of, I wouldn't say, I do the occasional development work where I'm like adding scripts, or I'm writing scripts to make data processing a little bit easier for me. We're doing this project right now where we're securing open source. And so we have a bunch of people who are integrating fuzzing into open source projects, and then they're sending it to us. And that doesn't always, sometimes it works, sometimes the integration doesn't always work. So then I get to dive into the actual code of like these random, and it's like a different repository every time. It's a different language. It'll be Rust, it'll be Go, it'll be something like that I have to learn. And I'll either like be like fixing builds or something like that. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, I usually kind of just go through a list of customers, list of things that I need to take care of, and just I'll either schedule emails for the next morning. I love that, by the way. Thank you, Google, for allowing us to schedule emails. Because it's weird when you're like writing an email at like 7 o'clock, you just schedule it for 9 a.m. the next morning. or just checking on kind of the health and status of existing deployments, and so just kind of preparing myself for the next day.
So you mentioned that you guys basically do the fuzzing. Do you consider yourself a salesperson or a hacker or a like a technical support, or like how do you classify yourself? Like, what is your I guess maybe your resume, I guess in its simplest form, what does your resume say that what type of person you are?
That's a great question. I would say by and large, I consider my role a customer success role. So it's post-sales, and it's basically walking the customer from point of sale to whatever their security goals are. I do tech support. Again, we're a startup, so
you have multiple hats.
Every hat. Yeah, everyone wears every hat. A big stack of hats that I just carry around every day. And yeah, I do some pre-sale stuff. I will meet with customers who will just have basic questions, and those actually it sounds annoying, but I really enjoy those calls because they always have such interesting questions about, like, how do I have this unique problem that I need to solve, and trying to talk with the customers to solve those problems is really interesting. So who knows, maybe I'll find myself in a more pre-sales role in the future. But yeah, I think right now I would really consider myself customer success, post-sales, from point of sale all the way till the end of the deployment, whatever the customer's goals are, whatever they're hoping to get
to success, basically.
Yeah.
And so what types of skills, if somebody wanted to go, would be like, hey, I want to be a technical solution engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
What types of skills do those people need? What kind of type of knowledge? Like, because I see that your experience is kind of like pointed you in this direction over the course of time, right? And that might not have been like the most efficient way to get to where you're at, for example. So, if you were going to, provide like the Cliff Notes version of, how someone does what you do, or is it that you need, certain experience in order to do well? What does that look like?
So I think it's important. I was never a proper developer. I was never in the role of a developer. But I think I worked with so many developers. I went to so many companies, and I saw like these super wildly different systems. Some people, they would be pushing code changes every day, and like they have this super, like, other people, they like work in these siloed groups, and then they have a finished product that they bring to other finished products, and then everyone argues about like that they're all wrong or something like that, and then they have to go back to it. Understanding the development and the build process is key. Because a lot of times what I do, if people will ask me questions about like, hey, what's the best way to integrate, or what's the best way to do this, and I need to be able to answer that from a place of experience. So while I was never a developer, I worked with so many of them, and I like helped so many of them set up security, that I feel very comfortable speaking to that sort of thing. So I would say, in terms of skills, understanding like the development cycle, from developing code, how they're pushing code changes, how they're doing checks, if they're doing any gating, how they're doing notifications, how they're managing tickets, how they're assigning tickets, things like that. This whole process and life cycle of developing and securing software. And what I will say now is that it used to be the case that there was like a security team, and they kind of did security and developers did development. And I'm seeing a lot more, at least in my role, that developers are taking the responsibility, not all of it, like there's still like mandates that come down, but like the responsibility of like implementing security, which you would think would be really annoying. And you would think that developers would be like, oh, geez, another thing on my plate. But what's another thing on a developer's plate is getting a random notification from a security team that they never talk to about something that they have to fix. If they're in the weeds and they're the ones, implementing the tests or like setting it up, it's not a surprise to them, and they have control over it. So understanding, again, like the relationships between these teams is also very, very key. So I think those types of skills are also really important. So
understanding the SDLC lifecycle, understanding, basically programming languages as a whole, not particularly being an expert or a programmer or anything like that. What about certifications? Is there any like thing that pretty much guides this from like a, how can I show my expertise or show my skill level?
That's also a very good question. I have a number of certifications right now. The only one active, I think, is the CSSLP. I like it. I don't think it's make or break for me. I think it was really helpful in learning a lot of the language and a lot of the subject matter around security. I don't think it was the thing that got me a job. I don't think it's the thing that will get me jobs in the future. It's a nice to have and not a need to have.
So no certifications, basically. Like it's just basically like having an understanding and being able to discuss, what it is you do and how it plays into different organizations and their development efforts. And
I'll say this. I'll say that certifications get your foot in the door. I don't think they allow you to win the interview, if that makes sense. So what I've found is that, people will look at my resume or something like that because they'll see maybe I have a certification or maybe I worked at a company that they're interested in. Get your foot in the door, right? But then when you do the actual interview or you're talking about it, you really need to be able to speak to the process and show that you understand the process. And I think that's, what I would say, go find some open source that you're really passionate about, maybe that you use every day, and just start contributing to it. You'll learn so much about it because there's all these like checks that happen on the code. So then you're gonna like, okay, and then people will open tickets, maybe issues on code that you committed, and then you'll have to resolve those. And you don't even have to be a developer. I don't think you have to be a developer. Maybe you can add a feature. Maybe you can just contribute, make something a little bit faster, or you don't have to develop new functionality, but like add a different tool or set up a containerized build or something like that. Anything where you're like, oh, this would make this more efficient, or this could be an interesting, or I'll add a security tool. Contribute to open source, maybe add security to open source or something like that. That will give you so much more experience, and it's free. Like no one's gonna stop you. I mean, they could always reject your pull request, but like in general, no one's gonna stop you from doing that. You can always fork repositories on GitHub and add stuff. So I think that's really good.
I think that would probably also help as far as a portfolio, especially for people who are relatively at zero as far as experience, as well as give you something to talk about, when you're talking about challenges or during the interview process as well. It can definitely give you something to talk about.
Totally. And make sure it's something you enjoy working on, right? I wouldn't just go on GitHub and just find the first thing and just start hacking away at that. Like there's so many cool things, so many weird software repos on GitHub. Find something that excites you, find something that's interesting, and try and contribute to it. And like you said, that will help you beef up your resume. It'll just also it gets you in the mindset, because the people who are contributing to open source have the same mindsets. They might give you advice that you would not otherwise get if you weren't already working on that project. It's just going to put you in the muck of it all, and that gives you so much more language and experience to speak with when you're applying for roles like these.
So one of the things that I think, just from interacting with you, I think you guys did a fuzzing workshop for us, and then I think also you mentioned that you're going to go do an API talk at a conference. Is branding. Your picture is absolutely amazing that we have. It's like, it looks super professional. Like, how does that, I guess, you speaking at conferences, having that, branding, do you just happen to take a great picture, or was this like, hey, I need some headshots, or how does that play into what it is that you're trying to do?
That's funny. It's funny you bring that up. That picture was from a photo shoot I did. A good friend of mine from San Francisco is a photographer, and I was actually trying to take photos for. I'm still a musician.
Yay!
Yeah, and so this was a photo shoot for like my artist stuff, and she was really nice. She gave me a really great rate on it. And so a lot of those photos are from that photo shoot. So shout out to friends who like are photographers. Honestly, that was really great.
Side hustles are amazing.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. And she's a great photographer. She did a really good job. So I use those photos all the time. And I think in general, we have a really strong marketing team. So like the stuff that we use and the content that we create within For All Secure, we have a strong marketing team. They do such a great job, and they have a whole, like, it's a very small team, so they do very good with what they're given.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think our marketing team is amazing, and they do a really good job.
So are you doing like the conferences as a part of your role there? Or is it all a part of your own personal like plan
It's
for world
generally a
domination?
part of my role. Yeah, it's generally a part of my role in For All Secure. I have occasionally been asked to do stuff on the side, not often. It's usually through my role here at For All Secure, um, which, if you're interested in doing more talks or conferences or things like that, I think working at a company that does that gives you a lot of leverage, because there's a whole team to help you secure these opportunities. Whereas if it was just yourself, it might be a lot harder to do. I don't really have to do anything except develop the content, and our team takes care of the rest. So yeah.
Yeah, I tell people within our organization all the time, like that they need to work on their personal branding and raising like their, brand awareness, if you will, like in the cyber street, so that people are aware of them and what they're working on, just because it helps
Mm,
to increase their visibility and their profile. And, for the most part, when people are hiring people, sometimes they go through like the front door, but, for the most part, they hire people that they know, or have people referrals of people who knows somebody who knows them. So I think it just, helps in terms of raising their own visibility within the industry.
that's a really good point that you raise. So you reminded me of something. A lot of companies, ours included, do podcasts. And
True.
um, our podcast is the Hacker Mind. Rob Famosi runs that. It's such a good podcast. Like I would listen to it whether or not I was working for this company. It's a really good podcast, and there's a ton of really good podcasts that are produced by companies' marketing teams. I find that, I don't know how other people do it. I find that our team, we almost never talk about our product in our podcast, which is what you would expect. Like otherwise, it would just put a bad taste in your mouth. Like, oh, this is just like thinly veiled marketing. Our podcast pretty much never talk about our actual, unless it's like a episode on fuzzing. Of course, we're going to talk. But other than that, like we generally never talk about our product or what we do. We just talk about the industry. And I think if you're passionate and interested in this stuff, it doesn't cost you anything. Maybe the cost of buying a good microphone,
Mhm.
to do your own research and maybe make your own podcasts, put it out there on Spotify or something like that. Be part of that culture. Be a part of that conversation. You know, email people who you think are interesting
Cool.
in the community. Yeah, people who you think are cool, and interview them, ask them questions, and put that stuff out there, so that when you do have interviews with other companies, you can say, "Oh, I listened to your podcast. I also have a podcast you can check out." That's like one of those like meta resume things where it's like it's not the piece of paper, it's not like your LinkedIn, but it's a piece of content that you have that people can go listen to and say, "Oh, this person actually cares about the subject," and they're, again, this is not going to be for everybody. Not everybody's a podcast host. I'm not a podcast host. I wouldn't do that for myself. But if that's something you're into, it's a great way to like bolster your own like standing in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if that's something, being on a podcast is something that helps move you towards the direction that you're trying to get into. Like maybe, being seen as like a voice within, this particular topic, or to be seen as like an authority on that particular thing. So,
Totally.
so what's up next for you? I typically usually ask, what's your world domination plan?
Right.
You've been at this job, I think you said, for 7 and some years, and then you at the job before this, I think you said you were there for 5 years. So are you, what's your trajectory looking like? What are you looking for in terms of like, your future positions, and like what is the end goal?
That's a great question. I'm not sure right now. A lot of things interest me. Um, I I like the role I'm in right now. I think what's been interesting a lot more lately is actually being more on the development side of things. and honestly more on the like vulnerability uncovering side of things. People do get a lot of money for like bounties
Like
and
bug
things like that.
bounties. Yeah.
Yeah, there's mixed opinions on that. Some people hate the bug bounty stuff because then people are like, give me money or else I'll release this vulnerability. I don't think that's a very ethical way to do things. I think you should always, work ethically as much as possible. But yeah, I would say either something like that. But I also find that I really enjoy doing stuff like this where I'm talking to an audience who has questions about security. So yeah, I find myself really enjoying trainings, really enjoying creating training content for people to try things out themselves because they always come up with interesting questions. And I also find that I learn a lot about security in the process of developing materials, because the best way to learn something is to teach someone else how to do it.
Absolutely.
First of all, it's a vulnerable thing because it uncovers the things that you think you know that you don't actually know, right? You sit down and you're like, all right, this is going to be the content. I'm going to talk about, I don't know, code coverage. And you start and you're like, wow, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Then you have to actually go in and make sure that you can speak from place of authority on something. So you're like going in and researching it. And I find that really exciting. So yeah, I think probably one of those two directions is where I'm going to go next.
Okay. So you mentioned that you're still doing your music. So what do you have a band, or what does that look like,
Yeah.
and how does that go live into kind of play into your day-to-day?
That's a good question. So in addition to all of the other bajillion things that I do, I was a part of a band for a while. It was kind of like my own artist persona. It was called The Ringer. I still have a website somewhere. So I did that for about, basically when I lived in San Francisco, I did that about 3 or 4 years. I live in New York now. I don't do that so much anymore, but what I do is I take part-time classes at NYU on music technology, and I'm kind of seeing like areas where I can kind of meld the two disciplines, if you will.
Mhm.
So I'm still writing music. I'm still finding ways to do musical things, but in a way that I find more aligns to some of my skill sets with some of the technical skills that I have. There's a lot of cool things out there. Super Collider is a programming language basically that allows you to interact with open sound control and like basically make noises by like writing code.
Mhm.
Tidal Cycles is another one. There's some really cool programming languages for music out there, like graphical ones like MaxMSP, stuff like that. Just some really interesting like CS music intersectionality going on that I am finding myself a lot more interested in these days. So.
Okay, cool. I think that's it as far as the questions I have. I don't know if anybody that's in the room, if they have any questions. Um,
I do.
yes, ma'am.
So, hello. Thank you
Hi.
for today, and thank you for your contribution, sir. That was fantastic. So you just casually dropped, yeah, I'm fluent in Japanese, but then you also mentioned you're from Kentucky. How does a young upstart from Kentucky get interested in Japanese? Was there something that inspired you?
That's a
Or
great question. Yeah. So as far as I know, and it's been a while since I've been in high school. As far as I know, everyone's required to take a foreign language in high school. And so most people take Spanish or French. And I moved around a lot when I was a kid. So I don't think I had satisfied my foreign language requirement. I was already kind of interested in Japan. And when I lived in Florida for a while and moved back to Kentucky, like sophomore, junior year in high school. And we had a Japanese teacher. And I was just like, oh man, that sounds so much more challenging than Spanish. I had already taken some Spanish classes. I was like, yeah, you can always do the bare minimum and like get by, right? And I'm like, oh, I could just take a Spanish class and graduate and I'd be fine. But like, well, Japanese sounds so much more challenging. And I was right. It was incredibly challenging. So yeah, you're right though. Like a high school in Kentucky offering Japanese, believe it or not, it exists. So yeah, I took a year of Japanese in high school, And then that was all I needed apparently to study abroad. I had to take 1 year of foreign language in order to study abroad. So I applied for a study abroad program, got in, and at that point they dropped me off in Osaka in a host family, and nobody spoke English. So I really didn't have a choice. I
Sink
went
or
to a
swim.
public. It really was, and honestly, that's the best way to learn a language. If you want to learn a language, go to the country. Don't go to any of the touristy spots. In fact, don't go anywhere where you recognize what the sign is saying. I find that like when I was in Japan, there was be restaurants where they'd be written in English and stuff like that. I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go to a restaurant where I don't know what it's saying. I don't know anything on the menu, and I just have to like awkwardly stumble my way through conversation and then get, I don't know, some horrifying part of a fish that I didn't know existed. But that's like a much better way. I mean, I guess I don't know any other ways to learn a language than that. That's the only way I did it. But I found that was like incredibly helpful in solidifying the skill set for me.
I know that they probably like drop their job when you go to like a restaurant and then like order something in the language.
Yes, it's much. That's something that I really like about speaking Japanese is like the Japanese are always so impressed. I think if I went to Mexico and I spoke Spanish, people would just be like, oh, whatever. Like it's not that impressive. But like the Japanese are so impressed when anyone who's not Japanese speaks Japanese.
Language.
Yeah.
That's dope. All right. Any other questions? No? All right, cool. Well, Alex, I thank you for coming and hanging out with us today. I don't think I saw you have a LinkedIn. Do you have any socials in case anybody wants to touch base with you?
I do have socials. Yeah. Let me pull it up. I can. I have one social. Somewhere on the internet. You know what? Can I just send it to you later?
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. If anybody wants to reach out, then I will connect them with you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex.
Had a blast. Thanks for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Everybody